Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the Quarantine Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Lawmakers reached a deal Sunday on a $900 billion coronavirus relief package after months of stalled negotiations and just days before vital benefits were set to expire for millions across the United States. The measure includes $600 direct payments for taxpayers earning under $75,000 a year. Qualifying parents will get another $600 per child. Undocumented immigrants will not receive benefits, but their spouses may qualify. The legislation also includes enhanced federal unemployment benefits, aid for small businesses, schools, and childcare, and money for vaccine distribution. The bill also extends by 1 month the moratorium on evictions and $25 billion in emergency assistance to renters. The stimulus does not include state and local aid, which the Democrats have been fighting for, or corporate liability protections, which Republicans had demanded. Congress is expected to vote on the measure today. The White House said Sunday President Trump plans to sign the deal. The first shots of the Moderna vaccine are expected to be injected today as millions of doses of the second COVID-19 vaccine approved in the U.S. started rolling out to more than 3,700 locations Sunday. The Food and Drug Administration issued an emergency use authorization for the vaccine Friday for people 18 and over. A Centers for Disease Control and Prevention advisory panel said Sunday frontline essential workers, including teachers, grocery store workers, daycare staff, police, and firefighters, and those over 75 should be the next in line to receive the vaccination after the first wave of frontline health workers and nursing home residents. This all comes as the U.S. recorded over 250,000 cases. That's 250,000 cases in a day for the first time Friday. Nearly 1 in 200 people in the U.S. was diagnosed with COVID-19 in the last week, though the actual number of infected people is likely much higher. In Tennessee, which now has the highest number of new cases relative to its population, nearly 1 of every 100 residents tested positive within the last week. Republican Governor Bill Lee is still refusing to issue a mask mandate. In Los Angeles, hospitals are making plans for rationing care if the surge continues apace in the coming weeks. Canada, Russia, and India have joined a growing list of countries that are banning UK travel after British health officials warned a new, highly infectious variant of the coronavirus is sweeping Britain and is, quote, out of control. London and the southeast of England have gone into a strict lockdown. British officials claim the new variant could be 70% more contagious, but is not thought to be more deadly. Many scientists are skeptical of the claim, which has not been peer-reviewed, and researchers say there's no evidence the mutation will impact the effectiveness of COVID-19 vaccines. President-elect Joe Biden formally introduced the team he says is charged with tackling the existential threat of the climate crisis. This is Brenda Mallory, who's been tapped to run the Council on Environmental Quality.
CEQ will work with a broad range of partners on a broad range of issues, tackle the full breadth of climate change, preserve the natural treasures of our nation, center environmental justice, and help more communities overcome legacy environmental impacts.
We'll have more on this later in the broadcast. President Trump's reportedly mulling increasingly desperate ways to overturn the results of the 2020 election. In a heated Oval Office meeting Friday, that included recently pardoned former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn and his attorney Sidney Powell, Trump considered appointing Powell, who promoted conspiracy theories about rigged voting machines, as special counsel to investigate alleged voter fraud. Powell had been ousted from the Trump campaign legal team over her outrageous remarks. Trump also reportedly discussed invoking martial law, which Flynn had suggested earlier in the week. Sidney Powell was seen back at the White House Sunday night. In related news, the Trump campaign is asking the Supreme Court to overrule Pennsylvania judges and throw out over 100,000 mail-in ballots in yet another last-ditch attempt to overturn his defeat. In other voting news, a federal judge Friday rejected a request by Georgia's 2 Republican senators, Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue, to prevent new Georgia residents from voting in the January 5th runoff election if they voted in another state in November. In Iraq, at least one person was injured Sunday as attackers fired a volley of rockets at the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad's heavily fortified green zone. The embassy said an anti-missile system intercepted the rockets mid-flight, preventing more damage. The attack came ahead of the first anniversary of President Trump's assassination of Iranian General Qasem Soleimani, who was killed in a U.S. drone strike near Baghdad International Airport January 3rd. In Afghanistan, a car bomb exploded in the capital Kabul Sunday, killing 9 people, wounding 15 others, including a parliamentarian. The blast followed a bombing at a religious gathering in Afghanistan's Ghazni province on Friday that left 15 people dead and 20 injured, with children among the victims. The attacks came just days after the top U.S. general, Joint Chiefs Chairman Mike Milley held unannounced talks with Taliban peace negotiators in Qatar. In India, over 24 people have died since mass protests began last month against Prime Minister Narendra Modi's move to deregulate agricultural markets. Officials say around half the deaths have been caused by the harsh winter, as tens of thousands of farmers are camping out in the cold or on the outskirts of New Delhi. A state of natural disaster has been declared in Fiji after Cyclone Yasa flattened entire villages and killed at least 4 people, including a 3-month-old baby. Prime Minister Frank Bainimarama sounded the alarm over the increasing frequency and strength of cyclones in Fiji. He said, "This is not normal. This is a climate emergency." Back in the United States, a new watchdog report finds New York police officers used excessive force and were unprepared to respond to racial justice protests that rose up this summer following the police killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis. Over 2,000 people were arrested at protests in May and June in New York as a stream of reports and videos of police violence circulated online. This is the New York City Department of Investigation Commissioner Margaret Garnett.
Tactics, which included encirclement, also known as kettling, mass arrests, baton and pepper spray use, and other tactics, reflected a failure to calibrate an appropriate balance between valid public safety or officer safety interests and the rights of protesters to assemble and to express their views.
In related news, a Boston police sergeant has been put on leave as an investigation is carried out into abuses during Black Lives Matter protests in Boston. The media outlet The Appeal last week published a report and body cam footage showing police officers used excessive force on demonstrators, including liberal use of pepper spray, and boasted about attacking protesters. A warning to our viewers, this story contains highly disturbing images. In Georgia, new body cam footage from the minutes after 3 white men murdered Ahmaud Arbery while he was out jogging show Arbery was still alive when police arrived at the scene. But officers did not immediately help him. They also declined to cuff Travis McMichael, even though he admitted to shooting Arbery. Lee Merritt, a lawyer for Arbery's family, said of the recently released videos, quote, "There has not been a black murder suspect in history who got the deference that these men received." Seattle police raided and cleared an encampment of unhoused people at a public park Friday and arrested over 20 people. Residents of the camp were given just 15 minutes to gather their belongings. Police also used rubber bullets to disperse protesters at the site. Community organizer and attorney Nikita Oliver tweeted, quote, "Sweeping Cal Anderson Park in winter during a pandemic is inhumane. Why not actually offer people food, supports, and services, rental assistance, places to live? Mayor Jenny, do better. Residents without homes are still humans and still residents," she tweeted. She was referring to the mayor, Jenny Durkin. The CDC has advised cities to leave encampments in place during the pandemic if they're not able to help rehouse people in safe places. In Arizona, members of the San Carlos Apache Nation have called a day of action today in opposition to a proposed copper mine in a sacred portion of the Tonto National Forest. The tribe says the planned mine would raze an ancient forest known as Oak Flat and contaminate a large swath of southern Arizona. The Trump administration's racing to approve the mine as part of a massive transfer of federal land to oil, gas, and mining companies in the final days of Trump's presidency. The plans include a proposed uranium mine in South Dakota, an open pit lithium mine in Nevada and a natural gas pipeline which would run through Virginia, West Virginia, and cross under the Appalachian Trail. We'll have more on this later in the broadcast. In cybersecurity news, a massive breach of U.S. government data continues to widen, with federal officials now saying the hack targeted the agency overseeing the U.S. nuclear weapons arsenal and 5 other government agencies. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said Friday it was clear that Russia was behind the hack. Just hours after he made the claim, President Trump broke his silence on the issue and said that China, not Russia, may have been responsible, while downplaying the scope of the hack. Trump tweeted, quote, "Everything is well under control," unquote. Trump's former top advisor on Homeland Security, Tom Bossert, told the New York Times it may take years to root out the effects of the hack and that, quote, "entire new networks need to be built." And the Supreme Court dismissed a lawsuit Friday challenging Trump's plan to exclude undocumented people from the final census count. The court said it was premature to rule on the case, which is, quote, "riddled with contingencies and speculation," unquote. Immigrant rights groups vowed to keep fighting against Trump's unconstitutional plan. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The Quarantine Report. I'm Amy Goodman.